In New York City in 2010, while on probation for a prior offense, 16-year-old Khalif Browder was arrested, accused of stealing a backpack. Browder and his family couldn't afford the $3,000 bail, so he had to sit in jail until his court hearing. Because of court delays, he spent 3 years there, waiting, only to have his case finally thrown out over a lack of evidence. In 2015, Browder died by suicide, with many pinning the cause on years of physical and mental abuse he suffered while in jail. As a result, bail is back in the national spotlight. Bail is when you pay money to get out of jail while you wait for your trial. It's been practiced for centuries, but critics think it creates a two-tiered justice system, where the rich get to go home while the poor have to stay behind bars. Those in favor of keeping bail argue it's an effective way of keeping potential criminals off the street. So what's the deal? Is America's bail system fair, or does it need reform? The founding principle of the US justice system is fairness, right? Innocent until proven guilty, the right to a speedy trial. That's how it's supposed to work, in theory. In practice, well, check this stat out. In the US, right now, there are more than 450,000 people accused of a crime but not yet convicted of anything, sitting in jail cells as they wait for their trials. But a large portion of them remain behind bars simply because they can't pay their bail. Now, there's no national figure keeping track of exactly how many, but in New York City, in cases when bail is set at $500 or less, only 15% of defendants are able to come up with the money to avoid jail. Now, I don't know about you, but I rarely ever have $500 on me. I mean, like, I got what? I have $5 on me right now, so. There's no national bail system. It can vary by state, county, even city. But in general, this is how it works. If you get arrested, a judge takes a look at your charge and makes a decision about what to do with you until your court date. The judge has a few different options. Option 1, you're released on your own recognizance, which means you simply promise to return to court. Now that can happen if it's a low-level offense and there's no prior criminal history. Option 2, the judge makes you stay in jail until your court hearing. Now that's actually pretty rare and is really only used for people who are considered a danger to society. Option 3, the judge sets bail. If you can pay it, you're let out of jail, and if you show up to your trial, you get that money back. The idea is that you're more likely to return if you have to cough up some cash. And depending on how serious the charge is, bail can range from a couple $100 to hundreds of thousands of dollars. And it's not unheard of for bail in some murder cases to reach into the millions. If you don't have enough money to cover bail, you have to stay in jail until your court date. Now that can last a couple days or even weeks. And that doesn't sound so great, right? Well, you can pay a commercial bail bondsman to cover the bail for you. You pay around 10% of the total bail amount, and the bondsman agrees to pay the court the full amount if you don't show up. However, that 10% is non-refundable, so even if you show up to all your court dates and are proven innocent, the bondsman keeps your money. Now this is how most people cover their bail, and it's why the bail bond industry made over $2 billion last year. Alright, let's first take a look at why there's mounting pressure to get rid of bail. As we said at the top of this video, the whole system is coming under fire because no matter the amount, bail will be way easier for a rich person to pay than a poor person. You're basically buying your way out of jail, which is one of the most unfair things I can think of. Even if it's a bail of $4,000, which is on the lower end, you still need to pay a bondsman around $400 to cover it. And not everyone's got that kind of money lying around. Like I just told you, I have $5 in my pocket right now. And having to stay in jail can seriously mess up your life. Remember, it can be days or even weeks that you're waiting. People lose jobs, they can't pay rent, families can break apart. For lower level offenses, not making bail might even lead people to plead guilty even if they're innocent. They'd rather pay a fine or get probation just so they can get out of jail and get their life back together. Check out these stats from New York City. In lower level cases where the defendants could afford bail or no bail was set, about half were eventually convicted. However, when defendants were locked up until their cases were resolved, the conviction rate jumped to 92%. The main takeaway from the report? Let me quote it directly. The data suggests that detention itself creates enough pressure to increase guilty pleas. California is done with bail. It recently passed a bill abolishing it statewide. The bill still needs to get over a few legal hurdles, but if it does, California will be the first and only state to completely get rid of bail. Instead, California will use risk assessment tools. Basically, they calculate each defendant's real threat as a safety risk or flight risk using things like the defendant's age, current charges, and criminal history. People awaiting trial will be labeled low, medium, or high risk, and a judge would then decide who goes free and who remains in jail while waiting for trial. Okay, now let's take a look at the arguments in favor of keeping the bail system the way it is. Replacing bail with risk assessment tools might sound like a great idea, but there are some serious concerns about just how fair they really are, because judges still have to interpret the results. Like, what if the tool labels a bunch of people medium risk, but the judge decides to keep them all behind bars until their court dates? Instead of reducing the number of people in jail, these tools could increase it. That's why the American Civil Liberties Union, which is no fan of bail, has come out against the new California law. Now, we did a whole video on the good and bad of risk assessment tools, so if you want to learn more, go ahead and check it out. I know you want to. Go ahead, just do it. Click it. And let's not forget the purpose of having bail. It's a tool to make sure people show up to court, and it turns out it's pretty effective at doing that. A government report found that when people were released without bail, about 26% didn't show up to court. But when they had to pay bail by going through a bondsman, the no-show rate dropped to 18%. And the fees that bail bondsmen collect allow them to employ bail recovery agents, also known as bounty hunters, to pursue, apprehend, and return fugitives for their court appearances if they decide not to show up. Think Dog the Bounty Hunter, just with less mullet. Probably. Bail also has another huge benefit. It's essentially a free service. It gets people to court at no additional expense to local or state governments or the individual taxpayer. If bail were eliminated, that would all change. For example, DC has pretty much stopped using bail since 1992. In its place is the Pretrial Services Agency, a government program where 350 employees monitor and track people waiting for their trial. And it's their job to get those people to show up to court. Now, the program doesn't come cheap. Last year, it had a budget of $65 million. And that's just DC. Imagine if every state had a program like that. That money would need to come from somewhere, probably your taxes and mine. Alright, those are the big arguments for and against the US bail system. As more states wrestle with the bail question, the debate will only intensify. What do you think? Is America's bail system fair? Let us know in the comments below. Oh yeah, and don't forget to check out that risk assessment video we mentioned. We also have a dope video about universal basic income I think you'll like. And as always, I'm your host, Myles Bess.